Shalom, shalom, everyone. Shalom, and thank you once again for joining the House of Shiloh today. We are blessed to have you virtually and in present, those who can join, and we thank you so much once again. We're going to continue in part 24 of the Now What series that we're working on. What to do after you learn the truth. The truth. This series is sponsored by the House of Shiloh Ministry and presented by yours truly, Brother Andrew Gladden. So we're going to go ahead and move to the next slide. This has been a long series, and we're finally to the point where we could say, what's next? You know all this truth. We spent 23 sections in the truth. That tells you how big the truth is. Probably could have spent another 23 sections, but we have quite a bit more still to go. And now we're going to talk about what's next, what we're going to do next. All right? Mm-hmm. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide and get into this. So finally, you have learned the truth. So let's ask these questions. If you are Israel, because we've gone through this quite a bit, what's next for you? And that means if you agree that the Jews, those who go by Jews that we know today, are not Israel, those who we see in Israel. So if you agree to that, and if you agree that the true Israel are a brown and dark brown skinned people, and if you agree that the true Israel suffers from the curses of Deuteronomy, and we talked about DNA, and you know that the Y haplogroup, or the father's DNA, is an E1B1A or E1B1 of some type of derivative. You can't help that historical archaeology shows that historically. You cannot deny that. And you know that you are Israel. And you have to agree with this as well, that the Torah of YAHUAH is eternal. We talked about this in the previous sections. So this is pretty much a summary. That Yahuwah's covenant is eternal, and he says it multiple times that the covenant is eternal, even though the church teaches against that. We know that that is wrong. You're making Yah a liar. He says it's eternal, and it didn't say, he didn't say he's going to change it, because in Malachi it says, I change not. So we know that it's eternal, and it means exactly what it meant from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And we know that he has a chosen people. That has not changed. Mm-hmm. And that his son came to restore his people to the covenant through salvation. Mm-hmm. That is exactly the purpose of the Messiah. So what do you do with this knowledge? All of that. That's what this section's about. And I know the first question is, it seems like it's all about Israel. But we have a section in here that addresses that question. So please bear with me if you're just waiting to see what that is. We'll talk about that. That's coming up. But this section here, we're going to say, what does the true Israelite do with all that we talked about in the previous 23 sections of lesson topics that we've already talked about, from the true identity of the ones who are in Israel to the true identity of Israelites, true Israelites, their DNA, and how the Torah is eternal and the covenant is eternal. So now we're going to talk about what do you do with all that you know right now? And there's a wonderful scripture coming up where we can start off and get a good idea. So let's move to the next slide, please. All right, I'm going to start our reading off today. And we're going to start in 2 Chronicles 7:13 through 14. You know the truth. And if you're Israel, what should you do first? All right, now this is Yahuwah talking. So this is a big deal. So let's read this. If I shut up heaven, that there be no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, and will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. This is a very popular verse, set of verses actually, that the church uses all the time But because they read from a Western perspective and not from the authors who are Hebrews, and to target audience too, by the way, they assume these verses just apply to anyone. And that's how the Western perspective teaches. It's so audacious to me that a group of people who weren't around for thousands of years comes and takes a book that took 1,500 years to write, by the way, and say they have authority over it, and they're in that book, when there was none of them around. None of them around. I was a young man trying to argue a point with another gentleman about Abraham's look, how Abraham looked. And he said, you can go into blah, 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 by archaeology and stuff like this and say that the Chaldeans were not black people. They were light-skinned or white. What's funny about it is we know that Abraham was in Ur. He was from Ur. Ur was part of the kingdom of Babylon. And who ruled Babylon at the time of Abraham? Nimrod. Nimrod was the great-grandson of who?
Ham.
That's right. You had a Hamite. You had a man with roots to Africa ruling the most powerful kingdom in the world at that time. You don't think that whole area was black? Or dark-skinned to brown, brown to dark? You can't deny that. It wouldn't make sense to say all of a sudden this white gentleman or very fair gentleman comes out of nowhere when the majority of the people, all of the people pretty much, were of a brown to dark brown complexion. Just people don't want to read their history. They just have to deny what's there in order to accept what they want to accept. So let's look into this very popular verse, because YAHUAH is telling us exactly what we need to do. All right? This is going to tell us exactly what we need to do. So let's move to the next slide.
I'd like to know.
Is there any questions so far, by the way?
I wanted to make the comment about the another reason why he cannot deny that that Abraham is from a brown-skinned nation is because the name Ham, which is the Hebrew Strong's number H2526, when you look up the definition for that name, it tells you it's hot, H-O-T. It tells you it's hot, or it also tells you it's black, or it tells you it's from a tropical habitat. And I don't know of any tropical habitats or locations with European skin. So that would defeat the argument right there. It also says he's a descendant too, but that name Ham, it tells you in the meaning of the name the color of the people. So that's another piece that I wanted to highlight.
Okay, that's good. Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So what we see here on this slide is the breakdown of the steps that these two verses speak of. All right. So step 1A is YAHUAH saying, "If my people who are called by my name," and then step 1B will humble themselves. So that's really the first step. Humble yourselves. Step 2, pray. 3, seek my face. 4, turn from your wicked ways. Their wicked ways. He says, then step 5 will occur. I will hear you. I will hear from the Shamayim. And then step 6, I will forgive you. Then step 7, your land will be healed. That's just in 2 verses. That's a whole lot. So let's go ahead and start talking about these steps on the next slide. Okay. We're going to get into some good old original Hebrew, I like to call it. So he said, step 1A.
Brother Andrew, before you get into that, I want to make a comment.
Me too.
Oh, sure.
It's gonna take a few minutes. I'm gonna set the stage for it. I was listening to YouTube yesterday, and there were 2 people talking and debating the Bible. And one of the guys that was discussing it, he said, people are asking questions because the dead does not get raised, the sick is not being healed, the blind cannot see, and the deaf cannot hear. So therefore, the miracles that Yahushua promised Israel is not happening. And he said, but Satan is getting everything he wants. So it looks like him and Satan are sitting side by side in power. And her response was, did you know there's a stipulation to everything that YAHUAH promises? So I don't want the audience to miss the word if. Who? My people. Now, again, you have pointed out who my people are. We know it's Hebrew Israelite, the original, overdressed in nature. If my people shall call upon my name. That does not mean you just call randomly. Here and there, this is the calling that happens every day, throughout the day, studying, praying, worshiping. It's a constant call. He said, and then, because we are people that wants to reap before we sow. But that's not the way it goes. We have got to sow into him, spend some time with him, and intimacy. So he can sow his seeds into us. When you get your blessing, you go into his presence. So I want the audience to miss the word else, but they start saying, well, these things aren't happening. The stipulation on here that we have to play to. That's the part we have to play. Thank you, Brother Andrew.
I agree with you. It's the same analogy as this. If I took seeds and threw them to the ground, and then I took a seed and buried it carefully and planted and put the soil on, healthy soil, and fed it, which one's going to most likely take root? The one that has had the time invested in it. And that's how the word of Yah works. You just can't go into the word of Yah just be a passerby. If you want it to take root, you want Yah to take root in you. You need to be cultivated. You need to be attended to. And you can't do that by passing by and just listening to a whisper or reading a verse. You got to do more than that. Minister White, you have something?
I just wanted to add to what both of you have said. That word "if" is a conditional statement, which is what both of you are highlighting. It's a conditional statement, and notice that our Messiah directed this comment to his people. The problem is his people who are called by his name are not doing what they're supposed to do, and that is why we're not seeing what we're supposed to see.
That's right.
This is not dedicated. This is not directed towards Christianity. This is not directed towards Catholicism or any of the other religions that are out there. This is why we're not seeing it. So even though the other religions try to answer this call, because it's not directed to them, they cannot reap the benefits of it. They cannot extract out of it what is being said here because it's not directed to them. So this is why we're not seeing it as a people, as a nation. We're just waking up to this truth.
This is true.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Yep, that is true. This is true because you can't expect a non-righteous people to have the power of Elohim in them, the Ruach HaKodesh in them to do the thing that the Messiah speaks about. It doesn't work that way. The people think they have it, but they have it based upon people who have no authority to teach this. And that's boldly stated, but you see it all the time. You see it all the time that the scriptures aren't taught correctly in the church. And they will fight tooth and nail against you when you bring something different to them. Just like what we're about to talk about now, because if you don't read the text in the original language, you miss the true meaning because English does not translate Hebrew very well. So you have to go back to the original language. It will blow your mind when you start reading the scriptures in the original language. It's just phenomenal. Phenomenal. So let's get started with this then.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, Brother David, you got something? Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I was reading Romans 5, right, and it talks about the Messiah came to save us all. That's, if you just read it from the KJV or from the Cipher Bible, that's the meaning or the message that you get behind it. But that's what I wanted to dissect it, and just like you guys started learning right here, is that he came from one specific people. But in the text, I can see why it could be leading to, he came from all of us. Doesn't matter the color, the race, or what part of the world you're from. He came from all of us. So,
what's great about Romans 5 is that the reason why people can't get Paul's letters. I heard a pastor tell another layman, a layman of his this. When his layman started questioning the things that they were being taught in church, and this is a pastor that had 7 or 8 degrees in theology. So, he's into the cemetery schools, as we would call them sometimes. He told this gentleman, this layman in his congregation, he said, if it's not in Paul's letters, we don't teach it. That's how badly the church teaches. That's how corrupt they tore up Paul's letters. And if you read Romans 5 and 21, because they do not know how to measure what righteous means, Romans 5 and 21 tells you the audience, because he's speaking of obedience to Torah, but because they don't know what righteousness means, they assume anybody that simply believes lives a sinless life. And they don't even know what that really means.
True.
So the problem you have with Paul's letters, and I love reading through Paul's letters because of this, is that you can't get it right if you don't know the definitions of some of the more basic words in Scripture, in the New Testament. If you can't define iniquity, wickedness, righteousness, faith, just, you're going to get all of this wrong. Because when you define those words correctly, it points to only one audience. It points to one audience because it points to Torah. And there's only one group of people that should be living by Torah when Paul wrote this letter. And that goes the same way. We live by Torah for others to be taught of Torah. We are the priests, and we're going to talk about that. So we'll get to that point. But yeah, Brother David, they just corrupt the mess out of Paul's letters. So badly. All right, anybody else?
I think we're good.
Okay, all right. So step 1A, if my people who are called by my name. And called is call, and it's a meeting or bringing together of people. So this denotes ownership of people. And the original or Paleo Hebrew means to come together to meet. And Kuf is the sun at the horizon, which is holiness, and Yaresh, the head. And since we know this is being used in a positive note, we know that in the positive definition, Boresh is used here where the man chooses to learn, which is considered righteousness, instead of him choosing not to learn, which is wickedness. And then you have Aleph, which is Yahuwah, the power, the Akseh, the power. So really you have a holy people who choose or chose finally to learn from Yahuwah. So he's saying, if my people will finally choose to learn from me, my people who are called by my name will finally choose to learn from me or take instruction from me, and that is Torah.
Correct.
So does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, any questions?
We're good.
Now let's go to the next slide just to show you he gave his people a choice. They chose to agree to the covenant. So he wants them to choose to do the right thing again. Exodus 19:7-8. And Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and laid before their faces all these words which Yahuwah commanded. And all the people answered together and said, all that Yahuwah hath spoken, we will do. And Moshe returned the words of the people unto Yahuwah. Mm-hmm. And Exodus 24:3. And Moshe came and told the people all the words of Yahuwah and all the judgments. And all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which Yahuwah hath said, we will do. Hmm. So was this chance to choose, was this opportunity to choose given to everybody? No.
Yes.
No.
Oh, I thought you meant all Israel. Sorry.
No. Okay. I meant to all people in the world, as the church teaches. Okay. We need to make sure we understand that.
Okay.
He gave it to Israel. He gave it to Israel. So those verses just prove that he wants us to choose to be obedient, choose to learn to take in his instruction, choose to live according to his will. Mm-hmm. That's another word the church can't define either, is will. Mm-hmm. So everybody follow me so far. We're good with step 1A.
We're on target.
All right. Let's continue. So here, we see here, what did they choose to learn? Exodus 19:5-6. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. So, we see here you must learn to keep God's covenant, and you cannot keep the covenant as spoken on earlier in this lesson, in the previous sections, without Torah. You gotta have Torah. You gotta be obedient to Torah to keep the covenant. Mm-hmm. So to be called by Yahuwah, you must accept and learn Torah. So this verse here in Exodus proves that 2 Chronicles 7:13-14 is applicable to only Israel. Only Israel. Mm-hmm. And here, like we were talking earlier, we're supposed to be a kingdom of priests because we have a purpose. Yah just is not going to make a kingdom of priests and give them nothing to do. What would he do? Why would he have a whole kingdom of priests? Mm-hmm. We have a purpose. We have a purpose. Mm-hmm. And the stranger will come to us. All nations will be coming to us, knowing that Yahuwah is with us, seeking Yahuwah. Mm-hmm. It'll be 10 to every one of us, as the scripture says. Mm-hmm. It'll be 10 to 1. Seeking Yahuwah. They don't know how to properly seek him. They're going to come to Israel. I believe you find that in Ezekiel as well. Hmm. All right. Any questions?
I think we're good.
I want to speak about. I'm sorry. I want to speak about the sun at the horizon. The sun at the horizon. The sun at the horizon, according to the dictionary, is when the sun rises in the morning. But for Hebrew people that gathers, it doesn't necessarily mean that for us. The sun at the horizon means the beginning of the day. So, of course, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's going to say in the morning. But we know that our morning starts when the sun sets. So our gathering time, it is also in the morning, but it's also in the evening. Because that's when our day begins, usually. It's right when sun sets, as the day began for us.
So that kuf is really a sunset, most likely, instead of a sunrise.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Anybody else?
I was actually looking that card up. Because it does say sun at the horizon. How about that? Okay.
It doesn't say rise. It just says it's at the horizon.
That's what it says.
So we can also look at it at the sun at the horizon tells us the time to gather, to learn, the time to gather to take instruction. Start our day with Yah, as one of my favorite songs are. YAHUAH is my coffee. Start your day with it.
Okay.
That's good. I like that. Anybody else?
Yes. Hello?
Yes, go right ahead, bro.
Hello?
We hear you.
Brother David.
Hello?
I guess he doesn't hear us.
Oh.
I hear that. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I couldn't hear you for a minute. So what I wanted to share is going along with Minister Ron's comment is that, and previously to the Minister White did, is that I was putting it all together and I found out that, well, pretty much you guys just said it. It's that YAHUAH is always light. Like in Genesis, like there was dark, but then YAHUAH said, let it be light, right? When a baby is inside of the womb, it's dark, but then there's light, right? There's light. The light is light. Does that make sense? So just like, the first Adam, he went through a timeline of darkness, right? Because that was his punishment. But then the Messiah came over here and gave us a message. So the second Adam brought light to this world. It sounded better in my head, but I'm sorry. But I think that this is where I'm going is going along with Minister Ronnie. It's just that YAHUAH always going to be into light, and the light is what we should strive for. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yes, because we know that when the fall came, we were in darkness. And of course, YAHUAH is light. And we know that Torah is light. It's what lights our path, right? So we know that the very revelation that comes from the throne of Yah is what lights our life and pulls us out of this darkness that we've been in, the sin, the slavery of sin. So, yes, I agree with you completely. All right. Anybody else?
I think we're good now.
All right, let's move to the next slide. So let's talk about the word name, and this is Shem or Sham, how you want to pronounce it. Has several meanings for Hebrew, and I wanted to just quickly go over them. It's what you're called by. It's the title you have, such as me as Andrew. But in Hebrew, it's reputation. It's a memorial, a monument, what people remember you by. It's your authority. It's your character, what makes one what he is. When you hear the name YAHUAH, I instantly think of his power, his place that's beyond reach. That's the character he has. And his character is like no nonsense. You don't play. When you hear the name YAHUAH, it's so powerful to me. So in this verse, it can mean authority, but it also means name as well. So we must ask ourselves, Does history provide proof of who were called by the name of Yah?
Yes, it does.
We have to ask that. Okay? So let's move to the next slide. We're going to start talking about the practice of taking Yah's name, so we can go into that a little more. So not only are we called to learn, to listen, to choose to listen and learn from Yah, by his authority, by his power, by his character, but people also took his name to show you who they belong to. The practice of taking Yah's name was common among Hebrews. That's the reason why it's been wiped out of the Bible. It just told you too much about who the people were.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have a man with the name of Yah telling you he's from Canaan. And if you know your Bible, you know Canaan is a Hamitic land. And you know if it's Hamitic, it's dark. So they had to remove his name also from his people. Even after their dispersion across the world, those who made it out of the great fall of Jerusalem, for example, the practice remained. The short form of Yahuwah's name, Yah, would either be at the beginning of the name or at the end. According to slavevoyages.org, anybody can go and look at this. You can review the names of the slaves that were brought from Africa to different parts of the Western world. And we're going to take a look at some of these slave ledgers where they got the names.
Okay.
So let's take a look on the next slide. All right. The first, I want to point out something. Look at the embarkation point. Embarkation point where they set off. We're going that word Wida, or Wida, as some people say, will be significant. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you look to the far left in the name section, what do you see? You see Yahlah, Yahlaede, Yahlali, Yale, Yama. A whole lot of Yahs, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go to the next screen and see a few more.
Oops.
Then you got Yapu, Yara, Barwar, Yari, Yasi, Yataka, Yata, Yata, Yatu, Bengai. And again, it's out of Wida or Ida. And we're going to point out where that's at. But this is the slave coast of Africa. So this will be the Ghana, Benin, Nigeria area of the coast of Africa. Maybe Sierra Leone also might be Florida. All right?
Mm-hmm.
These are African slaves. And look at the timelines. They're in the early half or the first half of the 1800s. Before slavery was in. You can pull this Excel from slavevoyages.org, I believe. That's right. Yep, slavevoyages.org. You can go and do your own research.
Okay.
Say again, brother.
That will put the link on the group chat, so that way you guys can see it.
Okay, good. Thank you. So let's continue. Okay, you did move. Thank you. So you see many slaves with this short form of Yahuwah's name. It's not purely coincidental. It's spelled like that. That's what the slave owners or the slave traders wrote down. They didn't come here and say, oh, make sure you do this. They wrote the name down because this is how those names were pronounced. Or this is how they would have written it and it was translated. All the slaves in these two images are from Africa, the West Coast, like I told you. There are far more than what has been shared here.
Mm-hmm.
You can find this specific source at the following site: People of the Atlantic Slave Trade Database, and that's theslavevoyages.org. So the next thing I want to point to you is everybody follow. Any questions on that?
I think we're good. Thank you.
So let's point out an observation. I want to bring this up real quick. I know a guy who met 4 or 5 black women in a bar. Let's say he met them in a bar. This is a true story, by the way. And he was of another nationality, but he thought the ladies were nice looking. So he came over there and asked their name. One said Takisha or Takisha. One said Alicia. One said Tanika, and so on. If you look at a lot of black, especially in the females, you see a lot of Ya and Sha. Why? The only difference is that they're spelled in an American format, so you don't see the YAH, but you hear that sound still in many of the names. You hear a lot of Ya and sounds at the ending of most of a lot of female names that are very culturally significant with the black population in America. Think about that. You hear them all the time, and you never thought about why is it that black people name their children with these sounds. You hear them all the time. Leticia, all the time. Matter of fact, I spoke to a woman that name just the other day. It's you can call it coincidental, but it's awfully odd. It's awfully odd for the people who were coming from the slave coast to have naming practices. They just happen to be spelled different because it's spelled according to the Western standard, but it's pronounced very much the same.
Brother Andrew.
All right. So,
I wanted to piggyback on what you just said. You know, when you begin to dive deeper into it, you can get rid of the idea of it being coincidental, because you can call it coincidental when you don't see a pattern. But when you begin to see a pattern, it's no longer coincidental, right? When you look at the areas in which they came from, they weren't all from the same area. They weren't all they did not embark from the same point of origin, right? They came from different areas, yet they still had very similar names. Not just the males, but the females also. Then the last point is the captors, the one who was doing the capturing, did not assign them those names because those names were foreign to them. So this is how, again, we know that those are their original names. So this gets rid of being a coincidence and makes it a fact, a truth, if you will.
And I'm about to show you something to prove your point. We're going to actually go and talk about exactly what you just said.
Oh.
We're going to go look at some highlights. We're going to talk about the embarkation port. All right, and we're going to look at 2 maps. And they're not going to be able to show quite as clear as I wish, but if you go to the link that I provide as source, you'll have to pause it. The audience will have to pause to really take it down. But if you take the link down in the coming slides, you can get a fantastic and highly detailed view of a map written by and drawn by white authors and researchers. These aren't books of blacks or Africans. These are sourced from white cartographers, researchers, and so on. So let's move to the next slide. So Ouida, or Ouida, is currently known as the Republic of Benin and sits on the west side of Nigeria. I think that's right. It's west or east. I keep getting confused. So correct me if I'm wrong, someone, or if the audience, if I'm wrong, please forgive me. It wasn't intentional. What makes this region significant is because it adds to the growing evidence of what this lesson has previously spoken on already, that the true descendants of Israel were and are in Africa. Okay, so now let's go take a look at the next slide to get our first map. So this map here, created by cartographer Emmanuel Bowen in 1747. And if you look closely, that circled area is Ouida. All right? Ouida. And was known to the English as the kingdom of Judah. I'm missing an H there, but it's Judah. And this is not the only map that shows these details like this. I got a map on the next slide that's, oh man, it's unbelievable how much detail it has. But this right here is a very old map that's kicking close to 300 years old. Why would they say the kingdom of Judah? Oh no, I'm sorry, I got it right. They spell it Juda originally in here. The kingdom of Judah. Why would this gentleman, who's from Europe, by the way, he's an English cartographer, why would he say this? That's not a coincidence. Anybody have any questions they want to talk about this one?
I just want to try to answer that statement that you made previously in the other slide about the location, that the Republic of Benin, it is in West Africa. I don't know if that's what you were asking or not.
I didn't know if it was on the east or the west side of Nigeria. That's all. I just wanted to make sure I worded it correctly.
Oh, it says situated east of Togo and west of Nigeria.
Okay, I think I got it right. Okay, good.
Okay.
Good. For some reason, I had it pictured differently.
Okay.
So let's move to the next slide and take a good look at this next map. It's harder to see. This is the one that I would recommend you pausing when I provide you the source so you can take a look. So what I'm going to try to show you here is that there are a bunch, when I tell you a bunch of little details here that shows you all the Hebraic historical regions of Africa. And if you look at the bottom left, it says Yemen Jews and Falasha, Berbers, Moorish, and Negro Jews. All right? You have, in fact, let me pull it up for you guys so I can speak to it clearer for you. 1 second, please. All righty. Coming up here.
While you're looking at that, I want to ask you a question about what's over in the right-hand side of the map where it says the Jewish kingdom of, I think it's Ghanata. I just wanted to point out that we're Jewish. It is so deceiving. That word Jewish.
Yes, it is.
Yes. So if you could,
the way we have to handle it.
Yeah.
The way we have to handle it, minister, is to say it this way. How many white Jews you find in Africa? Dating back to the 1700s? None. So they use the word Jewish and because it became synonymous with the word Hebrew as a recognition of Hebrew. And they try to say that it's a derivative of Judah, but I would resist saying that's the case. But the point is, it became synonymous with the idea of Hebrew. So that's why you see down in the left, Negro Jews, Yemen Jews.
Right.
And they're pairing this conversation up with the Berbers and the Moors, who we know.
Definitely.
And the Falasha, we know them some dark people.
Yes. Really dark people. Yes. I just didn't want them to think that there was a Jewish kingdom over in Ghanata. That's relating to Hebrew Israelites, not the Jewish people that are in the land of Israel today.
That's right, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes.
Okay.
You see where it says Ashanti to the left coast? Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make a point. I thought about a movie when you guys are talking about the Jews wanting to be someone that they're not. I thought about the movie called Trading Places.
Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
He trades places. Yeah, he trades places with this poor guy and pretends to be poor when he's rich to marry this beautiful young lady.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the people that are of a non-pigmentation is doing. They're trying to trade places with the poor that they can marry YAHUAH and YAHUAH.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
But they're pretending because their bloodline is going to say something else. And the reason why the prince wanted to trade places, he was a prince. His parents came to get him, did they not? And say to him, you are still a prince. You cannot not be a prince because you have chosen to marry someone else that is not of our culture, that doesn't change who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was coming to get Israel and say, I don't care who's pretending to be my children, I know who my real children are. What father does not know his children? And what child does not know his parents? You think that the person that created the universe is that confusing? The person that created your own body, you think understand how it works. You can't remake it, can't put it together again. If you fall down and feel like something's happening, you can't put it back together again the way it was. We have to, we cannot. So he knows who we are. But that's what they're trying to do. The Jews are trying to trade places with Israel.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to work.
You know what? They can look at all the damage the curses have done to us. But let's put the curses aside, because it has put us in a bad situation, and that's what they were meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they did a thorough job in curses. No other people have been put to the test like that. None. But let's point out something else, though. He said there would be a remnant that would survive these curses, and these people will have something unique about them, just like you see the stories in the Bible. Look at the black athlete, for example. There's nothing like him in the world. Look at the black entertainer. Nothing like him in the world. And I'm not saying African. I'm talking about Americans. I'm talking about Jamaicans and Caribbeans and South Americans. The slave trades.
Mm-hmm. Who
can do the things they do? You can't even explain it. It don't even make sense how they do these things. It's a gift he's given his people, why they suffered. You can't explain why every sport a black American decides to specialize or focus in, no one can compete with them, really. No. Every sport they're interested in and they invest themselves, they dominate.
Even in pickleball.
That's right. If you take a look at basketball, right? Like way back in the 1940s with segregation going on, it was just white basketball players. Once they start getting the black basketball players, the league are improving and seeing a lot more views because the black African players were more athletic. They have better stamina. They have better everything, pretty much. So even in the NFL football, that's what I feel like one of the reasons. Baseball, Jackie Robinson, you have a great example right there. Like, they couldn't hide the fact that they needed them in the sport.
That's true. And they tried to resist it as long as possible, especially college basketball. I can't remember. I don't know if it's Hampton University, I think the first one, but Houston University. One of those two were one of the first universities to have an all-black team, and they won the title. And because this coach knew in order to be successful, he needed black athletes because they were so good. Their athleticism is on another level typically. They're more explosive, faster. And we've been blessed. It's not that I'm bragging. You just can't deny what you see. And it's in every sport that they decide to invest in: boxing, football, baseball, basketball, whatever they decide to touch. So, and of course, speaking of that, brother Drew, speaking of that, there's been some black chess champions also. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. That's a mindfully strategic game. Do you know that the first hockey league in this country, in North America, was a black hockey league? Before the NHL existed. And all the the pioneering shots, the nets, the way they're shaped, all these techniques that they use today were created in that league. It lasted 40 years and fell apart. And the black player was not allowed in the NHL for another 20 years after that, even though they were the pioneers of the league. So I'm telling you, we are, what Tim Carey say in Living Color, we let you eat your green. Let us play on ours. He was talking about how good Tiger Woods was with golf. So he was upset. We let you eat your greens. Let us play on ours. All right, let's focus. We're going to get back into this map. I'm going to point out things because I can pull up the map.
Okay.
And if you look at the region in the south region, southwest, west coast, south of it, though, where it says Gaboon, you'll see the region that says Gaboon. And right below that, the word is Mavumbu Jews, Mavumbu Hebrews. There are no white Jews called Mavumbu. Then you hear Kabinda, and you got Loanoa Jews right at the bottom there. All right? If you go right by Gaboon again to the left, you got Santome Jews. All right? If you go by Nigeria, go straight up a little bit, and you'll run into Nigeria with your mouse. Right there, right there. If you see there, it says Levitical cities.
Oh, okay.
Levitical cities. If you move to the left a little bit, you got a little bit more. You got the Home Jews.
Oh, right here. Okay.
Yep. You got, then by Ashanti, you got Jewish traces. And if you scroll all the way to the left, where it says Rio de Oro, go up north, go up for me. Right that area, just go below that. Right, all those red words right there you see.
Okay.
That is the medieval Jewish kingdom of Kamnuri. That was a whole, and right by that is Lam, once a Jewish colony.
Oh, I see.
This is a map, and then there's a bunch more. If you go to this site and zoom in, you'll see many, 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 many traces of the Hebrews throughout Africa. This proves that millions of the Hebrews ran into Africa to get away from Rome. Where would you run? You couldn't go east. You couldn't go north. You couldn't go south. You had to go west. You had to go where the people looked like you. And this map is a wonderful example and testimony to the identities of these people. I'll give you an example just to show you how this is not, they're not the same. The African and these people in these coastal regions are not the same people.
That's true.
If you go to look at the Nigerian headdress of the woman, it's unique to the Nigerian and other groups in this area, the Igbo, the Yoruba. You'll see Ashanti with a headdress. You'll see people from Benin with a type of headdress. But if you go to Kenya or Somalia or up in Libya, you don't see that.
Mm-hmm.
You do not see that. That headdress is scripture-based. The way the clothing looks comes from Torah, and they don't even realize the modesty and the way it's covered. They don't realize it. It sets them apart from the rest of the people in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Just people don't realize it. Anybody have any questions about the map?
Yes. So where it says Rio de Oro, right? That area now, I mean, is occupied by people from Morocco, and they don't look. I mean, they look like more middle.
The northern parts,
right?
The northern parts would be, but that's close to Sierra Leone and all that area. It's that's pretty dark. Very dark.
Where did all those people came from? Because somebody can argue, hey, my family has been here for generations. I don't know what you're talking about.
These maps date back prior to the migration south. A lot of Moroccans are a mixture of white European Spaniards and African, Hamitic African. So you have a very, very fair group of people. And it was a Spanish, I believe French colony for a long time. I believe it was French colony, but I can't, don't get me wrong. No, don't quote me. It was French or Spanish. But these are European and very fair. So after many centuries of blending, you can barely tell that was part of Ham's turf. They're so fair. A Moroccan is very fair. Very fair. Mm-hmm. But that part of the area is very Islamic as well, that northwest Africa. Right. Very Islamic too. So you have a lot of Berber and Moor history. And them people were dark. They got driven out over the years by Europeans, and the mixture of the groups have lightened a lot of the region. But historically, I'm sorry, you go back 400 or 500 years, Berbers, dark people.
And Brother Andrew, the Moors, just like the Jewish people today have a physical distinction, and that is their nose. The Moors had that same physical trait, and it looked nothing like the Jewish people today. The nose of the Moors and the nose of the Jewish people are vastly different. So that tells you again that the Jewish people are not even from the Moors tribe, because the nose is wrong. The nose
they're not even a mixture.
I'm sorry?
They're not a mixture. They're not even an African. They don't have any African mix in them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They do not. And when they do genetic studies, we've already talked about that in the previous lesson. They are a mixed bag. They are a mutt. They have slept with every nation they touched, except you didn't see a lot. You saw very few touching of Africa, because they didn't go into Africa other than Israel. They didn't. But by the time they took over Israel, all the blacks were pushed already out of the area.
Mm-hmm.
You had the Turks and the Mongols that took over the area that are the modern day Arabs today. But that's another discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yes.
Going along with the minister's white comment, didn't some of the drawings in Egyptian history they break down the nose?
Mm-hmm.
Like some of the statues in Egypt, they break down the nose. Some of the drawings they break down the slaves and other people as well, so that way they wouldn't know.
The Greeks were notorious for that. The Greeks and Romans did a lot of that because they didn't want to give credit, because Africa gave civilization to Europe, and Egypt had a lot of that influence.
It did.
And it's well documented in Greek historical records that a lot of their knowledge of science, math, and medicine came from Egypt.
Correct.
So when they came there and they see this great civilization and the noses tell you what they look like, you knock them off. Now, what you telling me that all the Egyptian builders built monuments with defective noses and just tend to fall off? No, they were knocked off to hide their identity. And to this day, the Arab people that populate that region will get very upset at you if you say Egypt was black. But you have native Egyptians there now that are very dark.
True.
So they even have a racial class in Egypt because of the cross breeding and the taking over and the migration of people. It's amazing now people ignore facts and blow it off, but it is what it is. All that stuff is getting corrected now. You can't hide the truth anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move to the last slide so we can talk where this map comes from. And we'll call this part 24 a done deal. So the preceding map, the red one, excuse me, comes from the following book. The Lost Tribes, a Myth. Suggestions toward rewriting Hebrew history. And this was written in 1930. And you'll find it on page 266. All right? And the source is right there. So audience, please pause and you can type that in.
Okay.
And like I said, it requires you to go pull that source yourself so you can really look at the map closely and with very good and clear detail. What you will see like I said, many regions, West Coast was just littered with Hebrew, which is called Jews, but it was just Hebrews all over the place. And you'll see mentions of Levites, Ephraim, Dahomey, Jews, Jewish kingdoms, Ganada, Lamlam, and the Jewish kingdom of Kamnuri and more, like we've mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
There's even a place called pre-existing Yahwism. The archive source is far clearer, so when you pull that map up, you'll be able to see it with plenty of detail. Okay? You'll be amazed.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
All right.
Anybody want to add to this?
I guess we're good.
All right. We're good. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining the House of Shiloh for What's Next, Section 24, where we talk about 2 Chronicles 7, 13, and 14, and we get into the name, who was called by the name, and what region it came from, just to add to more truth. So you thought we were done with truth, but we're going to add more to your plate in this section as well. So please join us again with Section 25, where we'll continue in this part, breaking down 2 Chronicles. We thank you once again for joining us. Shalom.
And also, don't forget to go back when you get an opportunity to look at, if you haven't already, episodes 1 all the way through 23 to enhance the learning that you have today in part 24. So go back to look at parts 1 through 23, which can be found on YouTube or on the website houseofshiloh.org. Thank you again for joining us, and shalom.